With December right around the corner and nearly all smartphone launches done for the year, I think it's about time we wrapped up our listicle videos. I mean, it's almost Christmas and maybe it's time to treat yourself to something nice like a new smartphone. I know, not everyone can afford the latest iPhone or even the other flagship devices, but thankfully, there were a lot of mid-range and even entry-level smartphones launched this 2024. So if you're on a budget but want to treat yourself or even your loved one this Christmas with a new smartphone, now might be a good time to pick one up. And to make your life easier, we've compiled a list of smartphones launched this year that we think are some of the best in the segment. By segment, specifically mean their price point. So, I'm Jose from Yugatech, and in this video, we're going to be looking at the 10 best smartphones released in 2024 that are priced under 25,000 pesos. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Let's start things off with the CMF Phone 1 by Nothing. Yes, the same guys who gave us the Nothing phone launched the CMF sub-brand. It's also one of the most affordable phones on this list with a starting price of only 15,490 pesos. In terms of specs, you have a 6.67-inch LTPS Super AMOLED display with Full HD Plus resolution, 120Hz refresh rate, and 2000 nits of peak brightness. The only downside is that you only have a mono loudspeaker and it only comes with an IP52 rating, but hey, at least you have a cool customizable design, right? Now, under the hood, it's powered by a MediaTek Dimensity 7300 with 8GB of RAM. Depending on the spec, you can get it with either 128GB or 256GB of storage, but it does come with a micro SD card slot in case you need more. From our review, it set a decent score on Antutu of around 649,000, and in real-world use, it can run Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail on medium to low graphics. For cameras, you have a dual rear camera with a 50MP main shooter with a Sony sensor and a 2MP depth sensor. For selfies, there's a 16MP front camera. As for the battery, it has a standard 5000 mAh lithium-ion battery with 33-watt wired charging and even reverse wired charging of 5 watts. The CMF Phone 1 retails at 15,490 pesos for the 128GB variant, while the 256GB variant costs 17,490 pesos. Next up, we have the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus 5G. It's one of the oldest phones on this list, launched way back in January 2024. Nonetheless, it was a great phone for its price and still holds up even to this day. Despite its slim form factor, it even comes with an IP68 rating for dust and water resistance. It features a 6.67-inch Crystal Rest 1.5K Flow AMOLED curved panel and has up to 120Hz refresh rate. In addition, the screen has a peak brightness of 1800 nits and it's protected by Corning Gorilla Glass Victus. Did I mention it even has support for Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos for its dual stereo speakers? Now, under the hood, the Note 13 Pro Plus 5G packs a MediaTek Dimensity 7200 Ultra, which is already a year old at this point. And depending on the spec, you can have it with either 8GB of RAM and 256GB of storage, or 12GB of RAM and 512GB of storage. Now, as for our review unit, it came with the 12 plus 512GB configuration, and in Antutu, it was able to score almost 727,000 points. As for games, you can run Genshin and Honkai Star Rail on the high settings, giving users a more enjoyable gaming experience. For the cameras, you have a 200MP main shooter, complemented by an 8MP ultra-wide and a 2MP macro lens. For selfies, there's a 16MP front camera. For the battery, it runs on the standard 5000 mAh lithium-ion battery packs and comes with ultra-fast 120-watt fast charging. As for the price, the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus in the 12 plus 512GB configuration retails for 21,999 pesos. Moving on, we have another model under the Xiaomi family, the POCO X6. Launched in May 2024, this phone proved to be another popular choice in the under 25,000 peso segment. Despite POCO dropping the 3.5mm audio port, it does still look cool, and you'd also get an IP64 rating for dust and water resistance. Just like the Redmi, the POCO F6 uses a similar 6.67-inch Crystal Rest 1.5K Flow AMOLED display with an adaptive refresh rate of up to 120Hz. The screen is protected by Corning Gorilla Glass Victus and also supports Dolby Vision. Peak brightness is rated at 2,400 nits, and the dual loudspeakers, they support Dolby Atmos. Under the hood, it packs the Snapdragon 8S Gen 3 chipset, and our review unit came with 16GB of RAM and 512GB of UFS 4.0 storage. Given the chipset, we weren't surprised to see that it had an Antutu score of over 1.4 million. This means gaming will not be an issue with this phone. For the cameras though, you only get a dual rear shooter, a 50MP main with OIS and an 8MP ultra-wide. For selfies, there's a 20MP front-facing camera. Now, rounding things up is a 5000 mAh battery with support for 90-watt fast charging. Now, the POCO X6 is one of the more expensive phones on this list, starting at 21,999 pesos for the 8 plus 256GB variant, while the 12 plus 512GB variant we used in the review retails for 24,999 pesos. Honor made a big impact this year with the launch of the new Honor 200 series. For this video, the standard Honor 200 made it to the list with everything it has to offer in a very slim form factor. Interestingly, this is the only phone on this list without an official IP rating, so you do have to be careful with this phone. But aside from that, it does come with a 6.7-inch quad curved Full HD Plus AMOLED panel with an adaptive refresh rate of 120Hz. What we really liked about this phone screen though is its max brightness of 4000 nits, making it easy to use wherever you go. Under the hood, it's powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon 7 Gen 3 chipset. Our review unit came with 12GB of RAM and 512GB of internal storage. The chipset is not as powerful as the Snapdragon 8S chipset and only recorded an AnTuTu score of 831,000. Still, it was great for playing light games and even more graphic-intensive titles on medium to high settings. But the defining feature of the Honor 200 is of course the camera. It features a 50MP main shooter, a 50MP telephoto lens, and a 12MP ultra-wide sensor. At the front, you have a 50MP shooter for selfies. But what sets it apart is the AI function, which helps cleans up the photo nicely even in different kinds of lighting conditions. For the battery, it packs a 5200 mAh silicon carbon battery or SiCa and supports 100-watt fast charging. Just like the POCO X6, this phone also retails for 24,999 pesos, making it a bit more expensive. The newest model on this list is the Infinix ZERO 45G, which was just released a few weeks at the time we recorded this video. In fact, it's so new we haven't even finished our review as of this recording. But it is still surprisingly impressive in performance and features, along with a nice design and of course an IP54 rating. There's a 6.78-inch curved Full HD Plus AMOLED display with 1300 nits of peak brightness, so it's not that bright. But what's impressive is the refresh rate caps at 144Hz, and it's the only phone on this list to do so. The screen is also protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 5 and it's paired with dual stereo speakers tuned by JBL. Under the hood, it packs a MediaTek Dimensity 8200 Ultimate chipset and comes with 12GB of RAM. Users can also choose between the storage options of 256GB or 512GB. Given how capable the Dimensity 8200 is, graphic-intensive titles are not that big of an issue. For cameras, you have a triple rear shooter highlighted by a 108MP main, a 50MP ultra-wide, and a 2MP depth sensor. There's also a 50MP front camera for selfies. The battery is a standard 5000 mAh unit with 45-watt fast charging, but also supports 20-watt wireless charging and even 10-watt reverse wireless charging. As for the price, it starts at 17,990 pesos for the 12 plus 512GB variant. Realme also made waves this year with the launch of the new Realme 13 series. For this video, we're looking at the Realme 13 Pro, and it's one phone we really enjoyed using in the mid-range segment. Not to mention it looks great and it comes with an IP65 rating for dust and water resistance. The screen uses a 6.7-inch Full HD Plus curved OLED panel with a 120Hz adaptive refresh rate. While it's not as bright as other phones on this list, it does have up to 2000 nits of peak brightness and it's protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 7i. To match the viewing experience, users get a dual stereo speaker with high-res support. Under the hood, it does lack a bit of power, running only a Snapdragon 7S Gen 2 chipset. Our unit came with 12GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. For the benchmarks, it only scored 663,000 on AnTuTu, and it did have a harder time running more graphic-intensive titles like Honkai Star Rail and Genshin, but for light games, it's no issue. Though lacking in the performance department, the cameras are the main focus of this phone. After all, it packs a 50MP main shooter that uses Sony's LYT600 sensor paired with an 8MP wide-angle sensor. It's also equipped with a 32MP Sony IMX615 camera for the front for selfies. It's also equipped with a 32MP Sony IMX615 sensor at the front for selfies. And then of course you have AI tech to help improve your shots once again in all lighting conditions. The battery on this phone is quite big too, featuring a 5200 mAh unit with 45-watt fast charging. And as for the price, the Realme 13 Pro also retails at 24,999 pesos for the 12 plus 256GB variant. TECNO definitely stepped up their game this year in the mid-range segment with the release of the Camon 30 Premier 5G. With its unique design, leather back, and an IP54 rating, no wonder it was a hit. And of course, it has other features too. It features a 6.77-inch LTPO AMOLED display with full HD plus resolution and an adaptive refresh rate of up to 120 Hz. It's also the only phone on this list with an LTPO panel, but the brightness does peak at only 1500 nits. There's also dual stereo speakers and support for Dolby Atmos for a better listening experience. Under the hood, the Camon 30 Premier uses a MediaTek Dimensity 8200 Ultimate chipset, with our review unit having 12GB of RAM and 512GB of storage. It handled gaming with ease as proven by its Antutu score of 958,000, but you do have to adjust the graphics a bit for more graphic-intensive titles like Genshin and Honkai Star Rail. The cameras are easily the most impressive part of the phone though, with its 4 50-megapixel shooters. At the rear, you get a 50-megapixel main with a Sony IMX890, a 50-megapixel periscope telephoto, and a 50-megapixel ultrawide. The front camera, you guessed it, it's also a 50-megapixel shooter. And yes, it comes with a bunch of AI features to help shoot as well. As for the battery, it packs a 5000 mAh unit with support for 70-watt fast charging. The TECNO Camon 30 Premier retails for 23,999 pesos for the 12 plus 512GB variant. Samsung's Galaxy A series is easily one of the brand's best-selling models with its affordable price point and features. And in this list, we have the Galaxy A55 5G. With its signature Samsung design and IP67 rating, it was a popular choice this year. For the display, you have a 6.6-inch Super AMOLED screen with support for a 120Hz adaptive refresh rate. It's not the brightest screen on this list. In fact, it's the lowest with only 1000 nits of peak brightness. But at least you do have support for HDR10+ and dual stereo loudspeakers. Under the hood, it runs Samsung's in-house chipset, the Exynos 1480, and comes with 8GB of RAM. Our review unit only came with 256GB of internal storage, but it can be expanded via a micro SD slot. On Antutu, it scored 729,000 points, and in real-world use, it can run light games without any issue. But you do have to tweak the graphic settings a bit for more graphic-intensive titles. For the cameras, you get a triple rear shooter highlighted by a 50-megapixel main, a 12-megapixel ultra-wide, and a 5-megapixel macro lens. And at the front, there's a 32-megapixel selfie camera. The battery on the Galaxy A55 is a standard 5000 mAh pack, but it only comes with a disappointing 25-watt wired charging, which is slow versus the others on this list. The Galaxy A55 retails for 24,990 pesos for the 8 plus 256GB variant. Another POCO smartphone makes it on this list, and this time it's the X6 Pro, launched earlier this year. It has an interesting yellow colorway and there's a leather back case. Not to mention, the phone does have IP54 resistance for dust and splash. Just like the F6, the X6 Pro comes with a 6.67-inch Crystal Res 1.5K Flow AMOLED display and has up to 120Hz refresh rate. Brightness is lower at 1800 nits, but you do get Corning Gorilla Glass 5 as added protection. Of course, Dolby Vision and dual stereo speakers come standard on this phone. Under the hood, the X6 Pro packs a MediaTek Dimensity 8300 Ultra processor. Our review unit had 12GB of RAM and 512GB of UFS 4.0 storage, but there's also an 8GB plus 256GB combo available. Gaming is not an issue on this phone since it ran Genshin and Honkai Star Rail easily. Not surprising considering its Antutu score of over 1.3 million. For cameras, there's a triple rear shooter featuring a 64-megapixel main camera with built-in OIS, an 8-megapixel ultra-wide, and a 2-megapixel macro. There's also a 16-megapixel front camera for selfies. The battery on the X6 Pro is standard with a 5000 mAh unit and comes with 67-watt fast charging. As for the price, it's one of the more affordable models on this list, starting at 16,999 pesos for the 8 plus 256GB variant, while the 12 plus 512GB variant retails for 19,999 pesos. Last but not least, we have one of our favorite mid-range phones priced under 25,000 pesos, the Nothing Phone 2A. You get most of the features of the Nothing Phone 2, including the signature glyph lighting and the IP54 rating, but without the price tag. The display uses a 6.7-inch AMOLED panel with full HD plus resolution and a peak brightness of 1300 nits. You get a dynamic refresh rate of up to 120Hz along with dual stereo loudspeakers. It's not the most powerful phone since it only runs a MediaTek Dimensity 7200 Pro chipset under the hood. In fact, our review unit only comes with 12GB of RAM and 256GB of internal storage, and as a result, playing light games is no issue, but you do have to tweak the settings to play more graphic-intensive titles. titles. The cameras though are a direct carryover from the Nothing Phone 2, featuring a 50 megapixel main and a 50 megapixel ultra-wide at the rear. For the front, there's a 32 megapixel camera for selfies. The battery is also standard 5000 mAh unit with 45 watt fast charging. Okay, so that was a long video and I spoke a lot, but that wraps up our topics for smartphones priced under 25,000 this 2024. Out of the 10, which would you pick? Or would you pick another phone? Whatever the case, share your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, if you enjoyed this video or found it informative, do drop a like and subscribe to watch more. Don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. And of course, visit yugatech.com to stay updated with the latest tech news and reviews. In fact, you can check out all our reviews of all of these phones on the Yugatech website, which is now live. Once again, this has been Jose. I'll see you guys next time. Happy holidays.